Welcome back to the KDLT Sports video blog. He's sports director Mark Ovenden. I'm Zach Borg, the weekend anchor, also calling all sports, by the way. The winter sports season just concluding over the past weekend, although we have some new news today I guess we'll go over. So start with that. Scott Nagy of South Dakota State. Well, he's not of South Dakota State anymore. He's at Wright State. The Nagy era at SDSU ends after 21 seasons, 410 victories. I think it was 11 total NCAA tournaments between Division I, Division II. Not that surprising that he necessarily took a job. Maybe the destination is.
I think he just felt like it was time, if he was going to make a change, I try to put myself in his shoes. And, once I'd been here as a transplant for 20 years and had a family and everything else, it gets hard to uproot your family and move away. And I think he just felt like the timing was right now, either that or he'd just basically stay here forever, which we certainly would have liked that. But Scott's a good friend. His family, known his family. Scott and Jamie used to come down to KDLT on Monday nights when I used to have a segment called Coach's Corner, and that was their date night. And that was because the kids were little. They got a babysitter, and they came down for Scott to be on my show, and so we've been friends for a long time. He's far more than just a great basketball coach. He's a great man. So we'll miss him terribly.
I wish we still had that segment. That sounds cool.
It was fun. Yeah.
Other notes, reportedly his salary is at least double. We've heard anywhere from $400,000 a year to $500,000 a year at Wright State. They did win 22 games a year ago. Have been to 3 of their last 4 conference title games. Where does SDSU go from here? We've heard some names already being thrown out. Of course, there's the local connections like Tom Billiter. We've heard Ryan Miller. Rob Klinkenfuss is staying there, at least interim, but we know he's going to apply for the job. What do you think SDSU should look for? It'll be tough to replace a guy of Nagy's character. I don't know that you can replace that, but what kind of a coach do you want to bring in for a program that's on pretty good footing? It's won 20-plus games for the last 5 years.
Well, first of all, it's a Division I job. It's an attractive Division I job. Obviously, there's other ones that pay a little bit more, but I could live off $240 a year. I'm not saying I'm going to apply for it because I don't think I quite qualify, but anytime a job like this opens up, you're going to get some names from around the country that you probably aren't even thinking you would hear from. So rather than jump to the conclusion that, they should hire this guy or this guy or this guy, I think it's going to be interesting to see who they hear from, number one. Quite frankly, I think Tom Billiter would be at the top of my list, and also Klink, because he's been there 10 years, and people love him in Brookings, and that's a big part of it. Tom, however, has had the experience at St. John's, Texas A&M, and Rice, so he's worked in a big-time environment and understands what it's like. So the success he's had the last couple of years, and he had applied for the USD job, the success he's had with Augie the last couple of years. I had people asking me right after Augie won, you think Billiter's going to leave? I don't know. But again, the timing would be perfect for him to leave right now after winning the national title and having a 65 wins or whatever it was the last 2 years, and he's losing 3 tremendous players. Not to say they're going to be bad next year, but now would be the right time to do something.
Kind of similar to what we just saw with Nagy. I mean, they're losing 5 seniors, 4 of whom were really good. And there's also some talk that Billiter's maybe interviewing for the Milwaukee job, UW Milwaukee. Let's get away from the coaching stuff because that's all going to resolve itself and just look back on what might have been the best all-around season for college basketball in this state's history when you go from D1 to D2 to the NAIA. The stat I looked up was I think we had 11 total teams, men's or women's, make postseason tournaments. 284 and 90 was like the record of those teams. A lot of wins in the postseason for the women's teams. Of course, Augie wins the national title. USD wins the WNIT. You went to a lot of those tournaments, most of them. I was at the NCAA for the men for SDSU. What are you going to remember about this year?
Well, you were 0-1 at the one you went to. I believe I was 8-1 at the games I went to, and the only loss was the heartbreaker of all of them. That was when South Dakota State's women had Stanford beat. This isn't this. I don't think anybody can argue this has been the best year ever for college basketball, and I am very, as you know, hesitant to throw out those superlatives because I've seen a lot in 40 years. you're relatively new to this area, so that time frame isn't as big. For me to say it, it's like there's nothing even close. Nothing's close to what we've seen this year, because you had Augustana winning a national championship for the first time ever. You had USD winning the WNIT, so they won a championship.
Yeah.
It felt like South Dakota State had advanced to the Final Four, even though they lost that game to Stanford, because I've told many people that I thought both South Dakota State and USD had teams that were good enough to where they could have actually made the Final Four. UConn is by far and away the cream of the crop in women's basketball. But this year, there wasn't a powerhouse second team that nobody could touch.
It was very wide open.
There were a lot of teams that, Washington was a Final Four team, and they played the Coyotes early in the year. And the Coyotes are playing way better now than when they played them earlier. I'd love to see them play them again. But point being, I think South Dakota in general, based on all the things that's happened, Mount Marty picked 9th to finish in the GPAC, goes to the Final Four in the NEIA down in Sioux City, and on and on. Wesleyan advances to the Elite Eight. The Dakota Wesleyan men, after making the championship game last year and losing some key players, won a couple of games in the national
even got to throw
tournament.
out Black Hills State, their first ever appearance. They win a game, and their first ever for the
Right.
women.
Well, Dakota State goes to the national tournament. You got USF had a great year. And
Northern.
they go to the region. Northern goes to the region. On and on. It was a phenomenal year.
Not only that, even the teams that lost, like the Northerns, like the SDSUs, even when they lost, the games were generally competitive. It was almost, there were a lot of chances where the teams that lost had a chance to win and maybe even write a greater script. It was just a fun year, especially after last year where there was a lot of heartbreak, especially associated with Augustana and then the SDSU men. They got to kind of, those scripts don't happen all the time in sports, and they really got to redeem themselves each in their own ways this year.
Well, both the Augustana and USD championships were Cinderella scripts. USD, after losing to South Dakota State, I went out to the front of the Premier Center where they were leaving the building and saw the tears, because I wanted to congratulate them on their good year too, knowing that they weren't going to make the NCAA tournament. So the fact that they gathered themselves the way they did, refocused their goals. We had Kelly Stewart on Calling All Sports, and she said the very first practice after that loss to South Dakota State, when they knew they were going to go to the NIT, coach stopped the practice a little ways in and went, you guys look, you're practicing like we're done. She got mad at him. Bang. She got their attention. They got refocused, and they won 6 straight games, 5 of which were at the Dome. Now, it was fortunate that they got all those home games, because they didn't have to do that crazy traveling.
They did go to Minnesota, though, and get a great win there, too.
I know, but I'm saying 5 of their 6 wins were at home. Nobody else got to do that in the WNIT. And as they kept winning, the momentum kept building, and the crowds were growing. And the game Wednesday night, to me, when they beat Oregon by 32 points, was one of the more exhilarating games I've ever seen in terms of a wow factor. It was a complete domination of a Pac-12 school.
Perfect game.
They couldn't miss. It was crazy. They were, and then Ty Miller throws one. That was just of course it happened that night, because everything else they were throwing up was going in. She throws a football pass and it goes in at the end of the half. And then they win the championship game in front of a 7,415 at the Dome, all of them wearing red. I've been there many times when there have been that many people, and even more, but it's been split allegiances. There have been a lot of blue in the crowd. This time it was all South Dakota fans cheering for their team.
And that's why they got the home games, because they kept putting the fans in the seats. They had the bigger arena, the chance to draw more. In the NIT, they give it to you based on tickets. So hopefully this is the start of something pretty special for USD. They now move into that new facility where they won't get 7,400, but it'll still be a pretty fun place, I think, judging by what we've seen on the inside, to watch a basketball game. Before we close out the winter sports season.
We're not going to close out yet, because we didn't even talk about Augie's Cinderella story.
Well, okay, we'll go on. I also want to mention the high school schools,
That's
by the
fine.
way. Yeah.
We're talking about Augustana first, because I got down there at Adam Huntimer and I landed in Sioux Falls on Tuesday morning, drove all night Wednesday night or Tuesday night to get down there. We pulled in at the arena at noon, because I had something set up with Tom Billiter, and we were going to do a interview with Tom and send it back for the newscast, because they were playing at 6 o'clock. And I walked in the arena, and John Thomas, the former Augustana head coach who played for the Celtics, and my son Nick now lives in the house that John used to live in and raised his boys. He's the first one to greet me, and he goes, "So, what's the injury update?" I'm like, "What injury update?" I'd been on the road for all this time, and I had no clue that Dan Jansen had hurt his foot on Tuesday in practice. So, when I talked to Tom about it and said, "Well, what's this about an injury?" He goes, "Yeah, it's pretty bad." I'm like, "What do you mean it's pretty bad? Like, Dan might not play." Okay, so we just drove all night to get down here, and Dan Jansen's not going to play. Sweet. That is really sweet.
Well, you might be going back pretty quick then, in other words.
That's the whole point. Yeah. They lose tonight. We turn around and have to drive right back home. I was not happy. And it wasn't because of that. I was really disappointed, thinking they lost in the region semifinals to Northwest Missouri State last year in the disappointment. But they were going to win the national title this year, and they had the team to do it. And Dan Jansen gets hurt in
face of the really. I mean, granted Schilling's great too, but he's the all-time leading scorer. This is the one guy you think they probably can't afford to lose.
Nah, I think those two guys are equally as important. It's just that Dan got the National Player of the Year award. Casey could have got it. Yeah. Casey could have got it, and nobody plays with more heart than Casey Schilling.
Defensive end, especially Casey's value.
So anyway, they win that game on Wednesday night against a really good Tarleton State team. Against all odds. That was the game. That was one of the greatest efforts I've ever seen by an undermanned team that suddenly was a huge underdog. And Richter played great. Casey didn't have the greatest tournament in terms of shooting percentage. But like in the championship game, 20 points, 19 rebounds.
Yeah, I think most of that was at half, too.
They had 12 of them at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it was...
And 5 were offensive rebounds. So
who cares about the shooting line when you're putting together...
No.
When you're doing the gritty things to win games like that, which is what... That's his career in a nutshell.
It was pretty...
and then the next night, too, Western Oregon, you think all reports are, doesn't look like Jansen's going to play. They get down a little bit in the early going, and what happens? Jansen comes off the bench, and boom, 13 points.
Yeah, well, he came in and scored 8 straight points. He had 2 threes and a 2, and he was like Superman with a, Clark Kent went and changed it into his cape, and he flew in the game. And they really arguably didn't need him to win that game that night because Western Oregon just really didn't even put up any kind of a battle at all. But had Dan not come in and sparked the team when he did, who knows what would have happened. So, and then in the championship game, that was just sheer guts and determination by Dan and Casey, and Alex had another great game, but Casey played another one of his gutty. I think he might be the most determined athlete I've ever covered in all my years here. Casey Schilling.
Who wins, Casey or Cody, one-on-one? Do they just claw each other apart?
Well, Casey's the younger one, and Kurt and Cody used to take him to school all the time, so he learned that he had to be tough. Yeah. So I'm thinking Casey probably beat Kurt or Cody. And just because he's more determined to win. The other two are better shooters, no question. So if it's a game of horse, they win. Yeah. If it's a game of one-on-one, I'm going with Casey.
That was, by the way, the first national title for a team, men's national title. There have been a couple of women's ones. First men's national title for a team from South Dakota since SDSU in 1963. So long wait for our state. That also includes a lot of close calls with Northern and, of course, Dakota Wesleyan last year finishing as the runner-up. A great moment and couldn't have happened in any better fashion. Before we close out the winter sports season, we do want to send a shout-out to all the prep champions. You and I didn't really see much of them because we were running around to these college tournaments, but some unpredictable winners. Aberdeen girls dethrone Washington, who appeared to be on their way to a three-peat. Lincoln coming out of nowhere to win a second straight title. They came in with a losing record. They win the title. Sioux Falls Christian, their first ever boys championship. Warner, a perfect season for the Monarchs. We know so well for girls. They do it on the boys' side as well. I think it was Sully Buttes on the girls' side, avenging the Ethan loss, and St. Thomas More just kept rolling in girls' A. So that was a lot of fun this last March, wasn't it?
By far and away the craziest March Madness I've ever experienced, but it was a blast.
Well, we're going to take a break. Until we see you next time, this is Zach Borg with Mark Ovenden, and this has been the KDLT Sports Video Blog.